Welcome back. Episode 32. Solo today. Chris, partner in crime, is actually not too sure where. I haven't actually had a lot of time to catch up. Been a bit of a busy week. Busy training, busy working at the moment. Anyway, a few interesting things going on, but wanted to talk about a couple of things that I've been thinking about a lot recently. And one is to do with particularly relating to men, but our ego. And our ego getting in the way, particularly around training. And as a sprinter and a sprint coach, I saw this over many years and had to try and manage many egos as well. But, I still find and sit and think about it all the time because it affects me personally and many other people around me. And one of the things where I, being completely open, still affects me is as I've started to get a little bit older, a couple of injuries, a bit of a niggly back. And I used to pride myself on my strength. And obviously, over the years, my strength has started to get less and less. And you want to be able to keep, that appearance up and in your own mind, your strength up. And I was quite a good squatter and quite a good bench presser. And squats just tend to fatigue my lower back a lot now. And I know there's so many alternative exercises, and Chris is a great one here. Chris has basically given away squatting or any heavy squatting a long time ago and does a variation of exercises to keep his legs still in good shape for running. But he does, as he would say, say low risk exercises and high reward. He doesn't actually deadlift, he doesn't squat, any of those exercises that if you're not truly conditioned to, and I'm not suggesting for one moment they're bad exercises at all. Absolutely love them. And if you can do them, I would program them into my programs and recommend them to people all the time. I think both squatting and deadlifting, though, you need to have a coach and you need to really learn the technique because there is a lot to the setup and there's a lot to, becoming good at those exercises. But even a lot of other exercises, overhead press doesn't really agree with me anymore. I can use a dumbbell, I've got to turn my palms in. So there's just a few things that I've had to make adjustments on as I've got older. But it's hard. It's hard to give up and, your ego does get in the way. And really interesting, getting back to longer running, coming from a sprint background. I've run a couple of 10-kilometre runs since I've been doing some endurance stuff again. For those of you out there probably laughing, yes, it's not very far, but it's a long way for me when you've been a sprinter your entire life. But I expected that fitness to come back very quickly. And interesting enough, the moment I go over a certain speed, my runs, my heart rate just skyrockets and I can't get my heart rate down. And I've been reading a lot recently about, heart rate training, and monitoring my data more closely. We've got good access to data now with the watch. I have an Oura Ring and my HRV overnight. And that has actually been trending in the right direction. I will say it's actually going up all the time. And the better sleep I get, the better my HRV is for sure. But my heart rate, and one of the things I read the other day, is this garbage zone that we can sometimes fool ourselves to sit in, unless you're doing sort of high zone 4, zone 5 work, VO2 max work, or you're doing your long, slow cardio work, that zone 2 work. The stuff in the middle, I'm not saying it doesn't have any value, but there's a lot of data and a lot of, much smarter people than me out there saying that too many people spend too much time in this garbage zone. And interesting enough, I find myself stuck in that zone all the time. To run in zone 2, I virtually can't. I've got to basically walk. I can now cycle quite comfortably in zone 2, stationary bike predominantly. Otherwise, I find myself in this zone 3, zone 4 sort of heart rate space all the time. And I probably haven't done enough of the VO2 max work. However, as a track runner, I was probably either anaerobic or VO2 max all the time. So, yeah, I'm trying to even on my easy days, and I'm following, which has been amazing and fantastic for me, one of the Garmin coaching programs on my Garmin watch. I don't know if Apple actually do that. I've been trying to find one of those for my my girlfriend, and I haven't been able to obtain a good Apple program for her for a watch. But the Garmin has, great coaching programs, and I've found it invaluable. And even though I pride myself on writing, relatively good programs, but just following along on the Garmin 10K app on my watch has been great. But my easy days, going at my easy longer days, 45 minutes to an hour, I still find my heart rate spiking too much. So one of the things I've reverted back to, although Garmin don't really suggest this in their coaching program, they don't not suggest to do it, but I've been on that easy day to try and keep under a certain heart rate. I'm now just walking more. So basically, as soon as I see my heart rate start to spike, particularly if I've got to run a hill, or if I run in the heat, some days it's been quite hot in Sydney this summer, and the humidity, then my heart rate just starts to drift up. And now I just take that 100-meter walk, and very quickly my heart rate comes back down, and I'm able to, run for the next 5 or 10 minutes in that comfortable zone again. So, but that was a big adjustment. I thought I was going to get back to this really high level of fitness quite quickly, and it's taken much longer than I anticipated, and I suppose I wanted it to. But now I've settled into a really nice rhythm, and I have to say I'm really enjoying the process. I'm going through that, just enjoy the journey. I've got enough fitness where I can actually go out and have a reasonable run, even though, as always, we want it to go a little bit faster. But as we often think, when you get to the end game, what's next? I always reflect on something that someone told me in the mountains. He was an 89-year-old skier. I hopped on the chairlift with him one day, and I was still in that intermediate stage. For those of you who don't know, I lived the last 7 years in the US, and 3 of those years I spent living in Colorado at a ski resort. So I got to ski a lot of days. I'll never be a great skier. Started later in life, but I've definitely become a proficient skier by just putting in the time on the mountain. And, same. You just got to go and put that time and effort in if you want to do something well, and you will see that improvement over time. And anyway, I was saying to this guy on his chairlift one day, much older, how frustrated I was because I couldn't get out of that intermediate phase into that more advanced phase. And he said to me, just enjoy the process, because once you become very good, it becomes pretty boring. There's nothing to look forward to. And it was such a nice comment, and something I really needed right in that moment. And so many times I've gone out in the mountain and I've always had to progress, go and learn how to ski powder, go and learn how to ski bumps. And I mastered most of the mountain. And the last thing before I left 18 months ago, I was, into skiing bumps. I still can't say that I've mastered the bumps, but I was getting there. But it's just a really nice thing and a principle to go back to, and a thought that sticks with me about what he said that day is that, enjoying the journey is really the true part of mastering any skill. We want to just enjoy that process. And I think the beginning is really hard because you want to be that little bit better. But once you drop into that zone where you're comfortable enough and you're improving all the time, and you can just enjoy. And for me, being able to go and run for an hour now and just really enjoy running around Sydney and the sights in the morning, and has been such a pleasure and something I really, really look forward to. But when I first started back running, and you're running up a hill and you're out of breath, I'm done with this. I can't stand it. And this is never going to be, enjoyable again. So, yeah, I just wanted to chat a little bit about, our egos and how we need to put our egos aside. And I was watching the High Rocks Vienna on the weekend. It was a qualifying for the World Championship for the elite runners. And I think 2 athletes had to pull out. And one of the athletes is someone that I've been following quite closely, and I'm hoping to potentially interview him soon. We've been touching base on Instagram. But he had been quite sick leading up to the event. And he's very much a data-driven person. He's been following his HRV and his heart rate, and he knows all his times and all his numbers when he's running really well and when he's fit. And he was basically talking about his data leading up to the race, that it was really high. His heart rate was still about 6 beats per high per minute that he would normally like it to be. And unfortunately, he just couldn't get through that event. He blew up, his heart rate just skyrocketed, and obviously he hadn't recovered from that particular virus. And, I just watched a clip the other day when he mentioned he's not sure now what to do, whether to push on and go to the next race or see how his body feels. And I also think that's a really difficult thing about self-coaching. When I was self-coaching and coached other athletes, I could easily tell them when to stop. but I couldn't tell myself when to stop. And I would often, run that one more, I'd be a little bit sore at training or a bit of a niggle in a hamstring, and you're like, oh, I've got one more run in me, and you go and do that one more run, and then sure enough, you get an injury and you put yourself out for 2 or 3 weeks. And a couple of the guys I used to coach used to say to me all the time, what would you say to us? And I'm like, yeah, I would stop you straight away. So as a self-coached athlete, and when our egos get in our way, it's really difficult to actually tell yourself when to stop. And I found myself in that position recently where I feel like I'm being consistently tired, although I am recovering, and just to force myself to have that day off or to switch the run around is quite difficult. You have your program in your hand and you want to follow that program very closely. But sometimes you've just got to say, I just can't. Today is just enough. I'm too tired, and just, have that extra day's rest or an extra 12 hours rest, and, live to fight another day, basically. So, yeah, it's been interesting just thinking about. I'm watching a lot of these athletes, and as I've mentioned before, I'm following the high rocks along quite closely at the moment, and I'm about to compete in another one in Australia this year, and trying to get my running under control. But yeah, that's that zone training, and for me, just trying to build that base and thinking about it like a pyramid. You've got to get that big base underneath you. It's like everything in life. Once you've got that, big base underneath you, building a house, if you've got really good foundations, everything's pretty easy. And same with the cardio, the high level of cardio. And looking at all the good high rocks runners, high rocks athletes, they've actually all got a good running background. It seems to be becoming more and more prevalent that even though you need to be strong for a couple of the events, and understand that obviously when you push and pull that sled, if you don't have some leg strength, it will just blow you up completely. You may not recover. But if you've got that good cardio underneath you, and you can bring your heart rate back down in between, some of those events when you're maybe on the farmers carry, the kettlebell carry, or on the rower, and some of these things, you can actually just concentrate on bringing your heart rate down. I think it's beneficial. So yeah, just egos, we need to keep them in check. We need to rest when we need to rest. It's important to rest, and I think with the data we have available to us today, and to be able to look at your resting heart rate overnight and your HRV, it's super important. Interesting enough, I think I've been able to drop my heart rate by about 10 beats per minute over the last 12 months. Had the lowest heart rate, I think my resting heart rate overnight last night was 44. Living up the mountains in Colorado and not really focusing that much on my sleep and going to bed quite late, some nights had a resting heart rate of 60 overnight. But that's coming down quite substantially, and the HRV. And HRV is something I've never really looked at, even when I was younger. It's not some data that was readily available, but it seems to be becoming more prevalent, and the importance some people are placing on it seems to be, extremely high. So I'm trying to actually follow that a little bit more closely now and look at that data as well, and that's definitely, in my situation, trending in the right direction. But yeah, quick, short and sweet. Again, I would love to get some more followers on the podcast, and if you do like my podcast, I'm trying to get some better interviews on here and keep consistent. It'd be great if you could share it. And also, I do have a newsletter. If you're interested, there'll be a link in the description below, particularly on Spotify. I can actually put a link in there. So yeah, and if you've got any questions or any topics you want Chris and I to discuss around track and running, Chris is obviously doesn't engage too much in the endurance stuff. He'll have an opinion though. He does on most things. But just hit us up and we'll have a bit of a chat about it together. And we've both got a fair bit of experience in the track coaching sort of area. So yeah. Anyway, have a nice day and get after it.